encourage your soul, enlighten your mind, and empower your faith. This is the Light Network.
Hello, and thanks for joining us on the Why We Love Jesus podcast. My name is Brad McNutt, and I'm the host of this podcast where we spend some time slowing down and thinking about Jesus and meditating more deeply upon his goodness and his graciousness toward us. And we just simply take a few minutes to try and adore Jesus for who he is. Today, I want us to think about one of my favorite interactions Jesus ever had. My favorite interactions of Jesus with particular people are all found in Mark, actually. There are 3 of them, and this is one. So in Mark chapter 7, beginning in verse 31, I want to read to you the account. It says, "Then he returned to the region of Tyre and went through Sidon and to the Sea of Galilee in the region of the Decapolis." Decapolis, Deca being 10, polis, cities, and so an area of roughly 10 cities or villages. "And they brought to him a man who was deaf and had a speech impediment, and they begged him to lay his hand on him. And taking him aside from the crowd privately, he put his fingers into his ears, and after spitting, touched his tongue. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, 'Ephphatha,' that is, be opened. And his ears were opened, and his tongue was released, and he spoke plainly. And Jesus charged them to tell no one, but the more he charged them, the more zealously they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, 'He has done all things well. He makes even the deaf hear and the mute speak.'" And so when we think about this particular moment with Jesus, one of the things we need to consider is, first of all, this man. We don't obviously know who he was, as with so many of the Lord's interactions with people in healings and in miracles, because many times they were mass healings, a lot of people involved. But the man had some physical challenges, okay? He was deaf. He had a speech impediment, which is not an uncommon combination. One of the ways we learn to speak is by hearing people speak. And so if he's deaf, obviously his speech, his development isn't going to follow suit the way that it should. Now, the question is, how did the people around him view him? You see, sometimes certain Jewish people had the idea that if you were suffering some kind of a physical malady, there must have been sin involved. For an example, in John chapter 9, with the blind man who had been born blind and had been blind, obviously, from birth, the disciples asked Jesus, "Who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" And so it could be that some people viewed him that way. It could be that others viewed him as an annoyance or a burden or a problem, because as humans, we have this tendency many times to conflate an individual's struggle with the individual. For an example, one of my close friends who has now gone to be with Jesus, he had cancer for a number of years. And when I went to visit him, people would say, "Well, how's he doing? What are the doctors saying?" And I would tell them, in all honesty, I don't know. Because when I went to see him, my goal was not to have him talk to me about the disease that was attacking his body. My goal was to simply let him be him. And one of the things I would try and remind people of, as nicely as I knew how, was that he has cancer. He is not cancer. He is so much more as a human being than this disease that's attacking his body. And so with that idea, we can have that tendency, and you can see how, they're bringing him to Jesus. He's a public spectacle, perhaps in certain ways. Solve this problem. And one of the things I love about Jesus is that he seems to pick up on that. Because the first thing Jesus does when he interacts with him is he takes the man to the side. He stops treating him like a public spectacle. He takes him to the side and he sees him. He signals his intentions to him. He took his fingers and put them in the man's ears. And then he spit, which had, when you look at certain writings from around this time, there seemed to be some kind of an association between spit and healing and things along those lines. But let's not get lost there. What he's doing, and then after that he touches his tongue. And so what he's doing is he's telling him, basically through a primitive form of sign language, this and this. I'm about to do something for you, because then he looks up to heaven where God is. In essence, signaling God is about to do something about this. And then it says Jesus, when he looked up to heaven, he sighed. He felt the man's pain. Can you imagine, however old this man was, all of the pain that he had felt from being different and being ostracized and perhaps mistreated and terrible things communicated about him. Jesus, it seems in that moment, feels his pain in a way that only Jesus can, reminding us of Hebrews chapter 4, our great high priest who understands what it's like to be a human being. And then he restored the man's hearing and speech perfectly. And when the people see it, they rejoice and they said, look, he's done all things well, which seems to be some kind of an echo back to Genesis chapter 1 with that common refrain where it is said of God at the creation of every day, and it was good, and it was good, and it was good. Jesus is restoring the creation to what it should be. That's why, for an example, in Isaiah 35, 5 and 6, a picture that had eschatological implications was that the deaf would hear and the mute would speak. Here is Jesus doing all things well. He's returning it back to the way it was supposed to be. This is not the way. The fallen brokenness of this world, that's not the world that Jesus wanted for us. He's sending it back to the original design. So when we think about Jesus on this occasion, he takes the time, not only with this man, but also with us, to see us individually. And he is working to bring us back to the place of his original design. He's working in our lives. And it's one of the reasons why we love him so much. And so when we think about this, why do we love Jesus? Well, number one, he sees me and he sees you. And number two, more than that, he cares.